As we always talk about, good intentions executed poorly lead to terrible outcomes. The college said very clearly, our mandate is not to protect psychologists. Our mandate is to protect the public. But if your mandate is to protect the public, why are you taking away the guardrails of supervision and training that would best protect the public?
Hello, and welcome to Awake at the Wheel. So, in today's episode, we're going to discuss some of the changes that are taking place with regard to regulation here in Ontario, Canada, with regard to the profession of psychology and registration of psychologists. So, by way of background, I am a master's prepared registered psychotherapist. Oren has a PhD and is a registered clinical psychologist. So, our training, while similar, there are some vast differences, of course, in the level of education that we have, the number of years of education. Historically, however, the College of Psychologists in Ontario had a special class where they would allow master's prepared individuals to register if there was 4 additional years of training under the supervision of a psychologist, plus a large number of hours of service delivery and a few other different caveats. However, given the known shortage of psychologists and access to mental health care in Ontario and in Canada in general, there's been some discussion about changing the regulations and making it more accessible for some master's prepared individuals to get registered. So it's interesting because the associations that I belong to, as opposed to the ones that Oren belongs to, do have opposing views. We're going to talk a little bit more about that, but I want to start out by watching a video about the opinion of a psychologist in Ontario and how they feel about this. And I think that this echoes some of the opinions of other psychologists as well. So let's take a look.
I'm fuming. I'm upset. I'm sad. I'm really frustrated with, let's just say it's the government, right? Right now in Ontario, there are changes being proposed and changes that are moving forward for the training of psychologists in your province. So if you're an Ontario resident, you need to know that there are changes coming in the direction of removing training to become a psychologist. So removing some of our licensing requirements from the way our exams are held to the number of practicums that are required to needing a PhD, essentially bringing it down to a bare bones training. And that is what will be required in the future to become a psychologist. So we are decreasing the amount of training. I want you to imagine them taking doctors and saying, hey, you only need to go on 1 rotation and we're going to actually cut your education in half. That's what's actually happening. I'm going to post some more information about the proposed changes. There's ways the public can get engaged and complain. Please help us out. We're losing our profession.
So here's the thing. I haven't spoken publicly or much about this because it was an ongoing battle that I had to get registered with the College of Psychologists in the past. As I mentioned, I am master's prepared. However, I also met all of the other requirements that were in place, which was and I had more than 4 years of supervised work under multiple psychologists. I had more than the number of hours required, and so on and so forth. So I really did and still do believe in what was in place. But the reason that I didn't get registered was because of the delivery method of my degree. Because of my disability, I required online schooling because I can't function in a physical school setting because of my limitations. But although I met and exceeded all of the other requirements, it was deemed that the delivery method of my degree was unacceptable and I didn't get registered. Despite that battle, despite the tens of thousands of dollars I spent fighting them, I do still believe in the regulations that they currently have in place for master's prepared individuals to get registered. So I want to frame our conversation with that. But Oren, I know that this really does impact the profession, really does impact other psychologists. So what are your thoughts on all this?
Well, I mean, the fact is, they're doing this supposedly for, inclusion and diversity and so on, and throw in equity. And also, as you said, about access. I am all for getting people access to, therapists. We need far more therapists out there, good ones. And the problem is the way the college is going about it. They are, as the psychologist said in the interview, in the video, they're just stripping it down, and they're taking a good idea. And as we always talk about, good intentions executed poorly lead to terrible outcomes, and that's what they're doing. And I've got to say, and it may sound like I'm just advocating on your behalf, but I'm not. I'm being factual here. Knowing what you have done professionally, running a clinic, all the work that is entailed. And I know exactly what you do at that clinic. Okay. I mean, that makes you more qualified to do a number of things than a lot of psychologists would be. Yet the college said no on, some I'm going to call it technicality pretty much. Right. So the thing that bothers me the most, and people have to understand this because they're going to get a lot of misinformation. And by the way, I'm in a position because of the work that I've done. I did as a student in a graduate program, and as a psychologist, I know more than the average bear knows. So I'm just going to say a couple of things. I'll be mindful. But the fact is, a lot of the education when it comes to becoming a psychologist is unnecessary. Not all of it, but there are a number of courses that you do not need. And the programs are so different across the province and especially across the country. I know this again because of some of those research that I did on this. So you get such different levels of training, of education, and so on and so on. There are just so many discrepancies. Fine. But the point is, like I said, a number of the courses could be cut out. The years it takes to get your PhD could be shortened, and the master's maybe could be expanded so that you have an extra year to get more on diagnosis and assessment and so on that you wouldn't ordinarily get within only a 2-year program. So, there's a compromise that can be had. But the thing is, and I've said this for so many years when I've been teaching, which is, I said the most important education I got in my training or in becoming a PhD psychologist was through the practica. That's where you get practica and internships. That's where you find out what the work that you're doing. And there's oversight, there's rounds, there's discussion with colleagues, there's getting immersed in it, and there's guardrails because you have these people, who are running the show, and you're just one of the people in that program. Okay, and so you're getting the proper training, you're getting the knowledge, you're getting the understanding, and the patients are being protected because there is a lot of oversight. And so for the college to say, we're going to take out that necessary 4 years of supervision. And I want people to understand, most in clinical psychology, at least in Ontario, many of the internships are either unpaid or very poorly paid. But that's not what we're talking about here. When you have 4 years of supervision, you are being paid quite well. If it was, well, they're going to be in school for so long and a lot of people can't afford it because they don't come from certain backgrounds or so on and so on, there's not enough funding, fine, that's one thing. But if you're saying, no, we'll cut the education, which is fine. Again, I'm not saying just down to 2 years, but cutting it from 4, 6, 8, or however many years it takes to a lower number, fine. But you must ensure that once the person's out there, that they do have that proper training. And I've said to many people, quite frankly, would I rather have a psychologist who did, let's say, an extra 6 to 8 years of coursework, okay? Or would I rather have a master's student who got an extra 4 years of supervision, training, exposure, and so on? Of course, I'd take the latter. And they're saying, let's take it out. Just give them 2 years of education, take out all that training. And again, people are being paid well while they're doing that. Yes, they have to pay a fair bit to the supervisor. Okay. So some people don't like that. It's not the best system, but they're still being paid quite well. So it's not like we're robbing them of their livelihood while they're becoming a psychologist. Right. So I don't understand. I truly do not understand the logic behind cutting out that training and supervision.
And that's the thing is that I think the main argument that I've seen is it's in the name of inclusion and so on. And again, I will go back to my example and thank you for what you said earlier about my work and what I've done. Let's look at my situation as an example of inclusion. Okay, I was still able to find a way to achieve the requirements to the standard and again exceed the standard that was in place, even though I have a very limiting disability that made it such that I couldn't do it the way that others do. So in that regard, perhaps changing, because they have a stipulation in their registration that there's substantially similar education where they have provision to be a little bit more objective about the education program that one did. Is it substantially similar to what they've laid out in the standards as they are. So perhaps exercising flexibility in that regard, that could make up for some of these challenges that people are pointing out about inclusion. But stripping down the training altogether is absolutely irresponsible, in my opinion. And I guess maybe we should define what clinical supervision is a little bit more clearly for our listeners who don't know. It's not just it's not just something that's on paper. Like, it is an intense, concrete, structured relationship that a therapist has with a experienced psychologist, and they oversee everything that is being done. So to get rid of that, I cannot wrap my head around a single argument about why that would be. Because, like you said, these people are working a job after they're done school. They're making money. They're in the field. They're getting great experience. And I would say, from my own experience and from all the students that have worked with us, all of them have said over and over again that they learn more in the practicum than they do in class. And obviously, we need to learn those foundational things in school to be able to execute in our practicum. But that's where the real learning happens. So what's the solution? What's going to make up for that? I don't know. I don't know where this is coming from.
And the ironic thing is that the college has made it very clear time and again, when psychologists come to the college and say, "Hey, can you help me out here or there?" Or when the Ontario Psychological Association went to the college years ago saying, "Look, they'll try to advocate for us because we're losing our standing," especially when the college's registered psychotherapists came out, they were saying, like, "We got to protect our field here. What's going to distinguish us from the psychotherapists that are coming up?" And the college bit's being created. I forget which year it was.
I think it was
I think
created in
14.
2007, but then 13, 14 is when I think a larger number of registrants came in.
No, I think that's when it became the actual registered college. Like
Yeah?
they've been created, and then it got ascension through the government and everything in 2013 or 14.
Okay.
I think it's 14. But you're right, it was created before then. And I was and again, I was in a position where I saw what was happening behind the scenes. And so anyway, when we went to the college and said, like, how are you going to protect the field? The college said very clearly, our mandate is not to protect psychologists. Our mandate is to protect the public.
Mm-hmm.
Fair enough. But if your mandate is to protect the public, why are you taking away the guardrails of supervision and training that would best protect the public? Because again, for those first 4 years, when that therapist, if they're flying solo, there are so many issues that can come up that unless they have a really solid team behind them, that what are they going to do? Are they going to go to ChatGPT and say, "I have a patient who said
Yeah.
this and that," right? Right? They
Probably,
need.
honestly,
Oh
because
yeah, probably.
what are
Right?
they going to do? Yeah. And they're
Right.
not ready at that stage to be practicing independently. There's no way.
And the other thing is that I know a lot of therapists who, they are terrified to go out on their own. They liked having that supervision because the buck didn't stop with them. There
Yeah.
was someone above them. So
Yeah.
if something went wrong, they were protected because they didn't feel confident enough to be
Mm-hmm.
able to handle it on their own. And so I think a lot of therapists are going to feel kind of like, whoa, we are ill prepared.
Yeah.
The problem is, and I don't want to get in trouble here, but one of my colleagues, I don't know the person personally, but they put out a blog, complaining about these proposed changes. And I've got to tell you, when I read the comments to the blog, these are comments from people who are, I'm not sure where they are in the program, but they are basically people who are not going to the PhD route. They're ones
Mm-hmm.
who want this type of, stripping down and dumbing down of the programs. Reading their feedback and their comments, I hate to say it, but I thought I was reading junior high school or high school students, writing. It was not only, and I don't want to be like, people are going to complain because of, about, let's say, me nitpicking on writing. But the fact is, if I am looking at supposed mental health professionals, I want them to have the intelligence, the aptitude, the maturity, right? The
Yeah.
knowledge, the wisdom, the insight to be able to give a response that looks far superior to what I read. It was embarrassing. These
Yeah.
people, they could barely, and again, I don't want to get in trouble, but let's just say I was appalled at their responses. Like I said, it didn't show any skilled writing, and it showed
Mm-hmm.
immaturity. They looked like children, and
Yeah.
these are the people, without any safeguards, who are going to be let loose.
Yeah. Well, and if I can add to that, you're not nitpicking because, if psychologists oftentimes, and, I suppose it depends on their practice, but we are writing reports. We're writing things that are used in court that are substantiating a client's situation, that are diagnostic in nature. They're assessment reports. Like, you're trying to validate a point that, again, whatever the goal of that report is. And if these people can't write a simple post in a comment section, how are they prepared to write these complex, very complicated reports? Like that's really concerning to me.
Exactly. And again, just the level of analysis coming from them.
Yeah.
There was no recognition of the concerns, everything. It was just, I want this and I want that. And how dare you say these things, and racist and sexist. It was ridiculous. And this, once again, is what they're going to unleash on the public without any oversight. It is very concerning. And as you said, as mental health professionals, we can do so much good. We can, we can reflect a reality that other people cannot understand or see or whatever. And it's our job to communicate it in ways that, does help, people understand a circumstance, an individual within circumstances, and so on and so on. And it's so complex. And I think these people who aren't getting the right oversight, I think what they're imagining is something they're seeing on TV or something like that, which is, we'll have a chat, we'll talk, and someone's upset about this, and we'll have a nice time and everything. No, it's far more complex. It's far more serious.
That's basic counseling. That's not clinical psychology.
Exactly. And again, I can't understand. I mean, I can understand the theoretical logic behind making it more accessible for people, but cannot understand, how do you not protect the public by ensuring? Again, I hate to keep, I don't mean to belabor the point, but this point is the most important point, which is, given the work that we do, if done properly, we have to take such responsibility for our roles in being involved in someone's life and decisions that they may or may not make, or once again, writing reports and so on like that. We can't dumb the field down, and that's what's happening.
Just like everything, it seems, around us is being dumbed down, and I'm sorry to say that. And again, I'm sure that it's very insulting for us to say that, but that's the reality of it. Is that we're not selling candy. Like, we are dealing with people's mental health. People could die if we are not properly equipped to do this job. That's the scary reality of this. And to what I have 3 thoughts in my head at once right now, and I can't spit one of them out. So let me slow down. I read the whole history of the College of Psychologists and the master's class, and how much they tried to protect the profession from allowing people with the master's degree, even with the old requirements of the 4 years of supervision and so on and so forth. There was a period of time, I might be wrong, but somewhere in the 2010s, I think the later 2010s, they almost shut down that class altogether because there was such pushback from the PhD level psychologists. So to go from that to this is very, very strange to me. In a relatively short period, I'm going to say fewer than 10 years ago, they were pushing so hard to close down the master's class of psychologists, and now they're just completely doing a 180. I don't really understand.
Well, I really do think it boils down to DEI. I really do. Okay. And I think the people in charge are, I can't speak for them, but let's just say, if we can make inferences, either they truly believe it, which means they're ideologically possessed, or they're afraid of, being called racist, homophobic, sexist, et cetera. So they're just caving, even though they know that it doesn't make sense. And you are right. There was a lot of pushback before, and people have to understand, like, before there were psychologists, there were psychological associates, and there's confusion around whether psychological associates still exist. And then they were grandfathered into the College of Psychologists because before they were separate, and then the psychologists subsumed that and took them into them, and they basically became the same as psychologists, but they did only have masters. But once again, 4 years of supervised training.
Yeah.
Okay, and what they're going to say is that it's also because different provinces, and this is this whole interprovincial treaties, where they're going to say that if someone in Alberta or Halifax, I think New Brunswick, if they get a master's, someone with a master's degree in those provinces will become a clinical psychologist, just like someone in Ontario with a PhD. And if they go from one province to the other, they don't have to do any extra classes, any extra training, any extra exams. They just get stamped, so to speak, and they can practice psychology as any other psychologist. So they're going to say, because that's already in place, then why not, continue in that pathway? So for everybody to be able to do that, and they're going to say our hands are tied because once again, it's interprovincial, it's a rule. So if they have a master's there, they can do it here. So why can't someone get a master's here and say the same thing? But I'm pretty sure in all those places, there's supervised training.
Yes, there is. And I was just going to jump in and say that because many of my fellow colleagues from school were from Alberta, and they were able to register as psychologists after finishing school with several years of supervision. It was essentially the same as the master's class here. I think there's some slight nuance differences, but recently I believe Alberta has tightened up those restrictions even further. So it's not a matter of like, oh, you just get a master's and then you can register. No, there's a lot that has to happen post grad to be able to register, at least in Alberta. I don't know about the other provinces, but it's not as simple as they're making it sound.
Right. And I've got to say, as I said earlier, I realized in my graduate years that it was the internships and the practica that gave me what I really want to know, because I would be working with a patient. I would think I know what I'm talking about. Okay. I would talk to my mentor or supervisor, and their years of knowledge and insight and so on, they could see things that I had no clue about.
Yeah.
So finding out from that, like, oh my goodness, and even if we disagreed, it's like, okay, well, understood and whatever. And then months later or days later, I'd say, oh my gosh, they were actually right. Sometimes it's that you only, it's like, it's an apprenticeship. Like this is how you learn. You learn from someone who has got far more experience and insight and knowledge than you do. The problem is, it really depends on the quality of the supervisor. I got really lucky in some cases. In other cases, my supervisors were terrible. They were the worst. And,
and the fact is, as they water this down, the quality of supervisors is going to dwindle even further now.
Exactly. So there's other changes as well that we should say. So let's talk about those other changes. So do you want to? You may have a list. I'm not sure, but I can see off the top of my head.
I don't. Yeah, I think you're more up on what these changes are specifically. So go ahead.
Okay. So the jurisprudence exam, basically to make sure that we're ethical, it is hard. It is really hard, and it's not so much the information that's hard, it's the way the questions are framed. I won't get into it, but let's just say, actually, I'll tell you, it's like, you'll be given a scenario and they'll ask you, what is the right answer to, or, what is the right thing to do? And in some cases, it's obvious, it's black and white. Okay. Like, you know it or you don't. In other cases, they give you 4 answers. 2 of them are just not good, but the other 2, neither of them is great, but one is less bad than the other. And you got to,
that was like my exam too. Yeah.
Right. So it can be very tricky. I get it. It is really difficult. But what they want to do is they want to replace that with an online module where there's no fail. Okay.
No, come on. No.
No. You didn't get it right. Well, I guess you'll do. I don't know the mechanics behind it, but I know that when we do this, like at universities, whatever, where they have safety things, we have to answer. You read this, you watch this video, then you answer a question. If you get it wrong, they'll say wrong. Here's the right answer. Okay, do it again. Got it right. Okay. So
why
I don't know
is failing racist? Like I don't. Seriously, I didn't know that part of it. Like, that's insane.
Yeah. Okay. So again, when it comes to ethical behavior, they are, they're just eliminating that requirement. Oh, but we're teaching them that because it's an online module. But if you can't fail, there's no pressure to really understand it.
And to pay attention to it, and not just click through to get it done.
Exactly. So that's one change. And then the other change, if done properly, if done properly, it's such an important component of the process. I don't know how often it's done properly, quite frankly, but it's the oral exam. So in theory, once you've done all the testing and everything like that, and then you have an oral exam where you have, I think 3 or 4 of your peers, but they're much more advanced than you are, and they can ask you face to face certain questions. They can ask you about jurisprudence. They can ask you about clinical insights and knowledge and so on. They can do all of that, and if done properly, they can put you in these scenarios, and they can really see whether you understand what you've gone through over all these years. And I think that, again, if done properly, that can be the best test of whether someone is, in theory, prepared to go out there and work with the public. But they want to get rid of that. And it's so where is that ability to discern who this candidate is in front of you? It's like going for a job interview. If it's just simply, okay, we'll submit your resume and you get a job based on what says on the resume versus having a face-to-face, interview and really being asked the hard questions and so on. And the funny thing with that is the same thing where we assume that the person doing the interviewing, all right, will somehow gain some great insight by talking to them. If the person has experience, if they, if they're trained well and so on, they really can glean a lot from that interview. Ironically, a lot of people aren't that great and they think they are, and so
Yeah.
they hire the wrong candidates. That's what I'm saying with the college. If done properly, that oral exam component can be
Yeah.
so important in filtering out people or making sure the person, maybe goes back and does a little bit A, B, and C to make sure they're really, really prepared. If you get rid of that, you're losing that last, guardrail. So, it just doesn't make sense. And the irony is, there is one more irony. There is an exam where to me, it was ridiculous. I did very well because I studied for it, but it's called the EPPP. And basically, it's like all the testing that we did throughout undergrad, grad, to get into grad school. Okay. It's basically you do it all again. And it's, I think 10 or 13, I can't remember now, different fields of psychology, most of which have nothing to do with psychology. All right. Clinical psychology. I'm
Mhm.
sorry. Right. It's all these other areas that we studied before we became a clinical psychologist. So we had to have passed them, to pass these exams over and over and over, in order to get to where we are now. So what's the point of doing it again, especially when 70 or 80% of the material has nothing to do with what we're going to be
Right.
practicing, right? So if they got rid of that, I'd go, makes sense, because we already know the person knows that stuff. But they're keeping that, I believe. I'm pretty sure they're keeping it and getting rid of the stuff they should not get rid of. I don't understand.
And this, this isn't factual what I'm going to say, so I hope I don't get in trouble for saying this, but I think that a lot of this was probably born out of the fact that the college that I'm registered with, the CRPO, is gaining a lot more traction and gaining a lot more power in the industry. And maybe the CPO is like, oh shit, we need to do something to gain our standing back in the profession. I don't know, but it doesn't. None of this makes sense to me.
And I don't know how you gain your or regain your standing when you lower your standards. So
Yeah, because I will say, at least with the ones that we've worked with and we've supervised, the registered psychotherapists that have come through our clinic are amazing and so well trained and so um, ethical and they're strong clinicians. So I almost wonder if the standards of the CRPO are going to be somewhat higher in some ways.
that would be truly ironic. Okay. And,
Yeah.
yeah. And again, when you talk about that, because I've supervised, quite a few therapists over the years, and I really take that seriously. I
Hmm.
love that ability, to talk with them and saying,
Yeah.
hey, yeah, you know what you said, that makes sense. Have you thought about this? Or, you know what, I know it doesn't seem obvious and I don't know this client that you're working with directly. You know them better, but try this. And then hearing them and they go back and they try and they go, oh my gosh, that opened up a whole other door and everything like
Yeah.
that. You don't get that without, again, having that
Yeah.
special relationship with that
Yes.
supervisor. And in my case, someone I call mentor. Okay. He
Yes.
became my mentor in the
Yeah.
field. And to this day, I still will call him my mentor many years later because of
Yeah.
the impact he had on me and my
Yeah.
practice.
Yeah, and it's necessary. And again, I feel like I'm beating a dead horse now, but it's just beyond my comprehension how this is the solution. Like I obviously don't make the rules, so my opinion doesn't matter here, but there's ways around this, even if they want to change the standards, maybe go back to having more of a two-tiered system like how they had psych associates and psychologists. Narrow the scope of diagnoses that a psych associate could do, for example. Um, something like if because I do recognize that there is a need in in the province to have more mental health clinicians who can diagnose, right? That's the chief difference between psychotherapists and psychologists is that you can diagnose and I cannot. So fine, but if the crises in our province are surrounding things like mood disorders, depression, anxiety, trauma, and so on, give some the ability to diagnose maybe one class of disorders and not the other, and you have to do additional training or additional supervision. There's so many other solutions to this other than a blanket dumbing down of the standards, but that's just
Well,
my
exactly.
opinion.
No, well, it's the right opinion. Okay, right. This is a complex situation that requires a nuanced approach, and we're seeing a black and white
Mhm.
approach. And and Anyway, we'll see what happens. Psychologists are able to write to the college and give their thoughts and feedback and so on. And I hope that enough people get involved and say, and I hope enough patients get involved and say that, we've seen different types of therapists, and we know what is important, what is lacking, and so on. And I hope that, the public speaks out and really, just puts the brakes on this, because it is just the wrong solution. Once again, there is a problem. A solution is required. This is just the wrong one.
Yeah, agreed. So I'm curious what our listeners think. And again, like the psychologist in the video that we watched at the beginning of the episode said, the college is looking for the public's opinion. So if you have a strong opinion, I encourage you to voice that opinion, because ultimately these colleges and regulators exist to protect the public. It's not necessarily about us and what we want. It's about what's best for the public. So definitely make your voice heard. Let us know in the comments what you think. Is this good? Is this bad? Are we overreacting? Let us know what you think.
Okay, and on that prudent note, until next time, keep your eyes on the road and your hands upon the wheel.